What's up, fungal associates? Welcome to Completely Arbortrary. It's a podcast about trees and other related topics. I am one of your hosts, or hosts. My name is Alex Crowson.
Did you forget the T in hosts?
I said hosts.
So yeah, hosts.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm the other host, Casey Clapp.
Wow.
Good to see you, everyone.
Hello, everybody. We're watching.
Yeah, we are. We can see every one of you.
Casey and I are kind of like Santa Claus in that way, and a few other ways.
Yeah, a few other ways. We are. Yeah. Thank you for making sure that everyone knew that, Alex.
We're both jolly.
We're both quite enamored by candy.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Is that part of his lore that he loves candy?
I feel like it, isn't it?
Might be thinking of the Easter Bunny.
Maybe. Yeah, that's true. I get them confused often.
Or are they the same person?
Oh my God. Now that's a conspiracy waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Of all the conspiracies we're going to be talking about today, that's my favorite.
I love a conspiracy that nobody cares about.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, Alex, you're going to love this episode.
It's like top three are like 9/11, JFK assassination, and are Santa and the Easter Bunny the same
Santa
person?
and the Easter Bunny the same person? I don't know.
Casey,
Alex Crowson, good day.
how you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited. I'm excited for today.
Yes, me too, man.
Yeah, this is good. Everything's feeling good. Feeling really good.
Great, me too.
How about you? I was going to ask.
Yeah,
Nice shirt.
Hey, thank you. I'm donning my my Completely Arbortrary t-shirt. You can get your own at arbortrarypod.com/merch.
If you can't handle looking so good, I guess don't go. But,
Yeah.
you know, if you think you got the chops,
What do you want to look dumb?
come to our store.
No, opposite.
Oh, geez, don't come to our store.
Casey, I'm also excited for today. Should we let the people know what's happening today?
Yeah, we're talking about a Catalpa.
Well, yes, we're talking about the Catalpa.
Woo!
Way to pull that plug.
Yeah, sorry.
Also, we're recording another episode with our friends
Yeah.
from another podcast, and that's going to be on our Patreon. I believe, let's see, it came out 3 months ago.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're listening to this on release day.
Yeah, go get it. It's so good. Like it was so much fun.
Yes, it's going to be and was and is so good.
I love our meta time in our podcast. I know sometimes you don't like it.
It's like podcasting 101. You should never like date the episode.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
I just did it myself. So
Hey, sorry, what are we?
Casey, today we're talking about a tree as we do every episode. And the tree we're talking about today, as you teased, I'll say, is the Southern Catalpa.
The Southern Catalpa. I just closed out the opening for the Northern Catalpa because I was deciding which one should we do.
Putting that to rest.
Yeah, it's to rest now. It's closed out. The Southern Catalpa. Catalpa bignonioides.
One more time.
Catalpa bignonioides.
Bignonioides.
Yeah, isn't that great?
That is delightful.
Have you seen how to spell it?
Huh?
Have you seen how it's spelled?
Can I take a guess?
You may.
BIG.
Yep.
NON.
Yep.
I.
Yep.
O. DES.
You forgot another I after the O.
OIDES.
Yeah, bignonioides.
Bignonioides.
Yeah, isn't that great?
That's one of my favorites, I would say.
It's one of my too. When I was deciding, should we do the Northern or Southern Catalpa? That was the thing. I was like, I want to say bignonioides on the microphone.
And, hey, speaking of Southern Catalpa,
Yes, sir.
this tree, the genus, is the name of the species.
Yes.
Like the Southern Magnolia.
Precisely. It's so nice. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun when that happens.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. You don't have to memorize several different things. You just got it. You already know it. If you know it, you know it.
It makes Glyptostroboides look like a piece of shit.
Yeah, it sure does. Like, what is that? Redwood? Oh, jeez.
There's so much there.
Nah, not into it, baby.
Casey, as we do every episode, let's imagine that you and I, hey, how about this? We're walking to get some pasta at Portland restaurant Montelupo.
Yep.
And just outside, there is what I would categorize as a legendary, a monstrous
Strictly.
Southern Catalpa tree.
Yep, I believe that is the case, and I'll tell you why I believe that in a second.
Okay. Casey, let's ID this tree.
Let's do it. So the Catalpa is a gorgeous tree.
Hell yeah.
That's what you see when you walk like closer to it. You're like, oh my God, stunning.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing is you're walking into it, and it has these big floppy leaves, and they're like the size of an elephant's ear.
Yeah.
And they're really like big, that's the best way to do it. Like the palm of your hand is not big enough to have them to go around it.
This thing is bigger. 3 palms, I would say.
It's a good 3 palms. And the 3 palm leaves are oppositely arranged along the twig.
I want to make a correction.
Oh,
I don't want to call them 3 palm leaves because I think it might be confusing.
Because you palm like palm trees.
Yes.
I see. Yes, these are 3 hand palm size leaves.
Yes. Sure.
It's a little clunky.
You don't want to add another thing instead of taking something away.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Well, sometimes it clarifies it. I don't know.
I like elephant ear.
All right, let's go elephant ear. And I'm speaking strictly of the kind you get at the fair.
Right. Yeah. Their leaves are covered in cinnamon sugar.
It's amazing. No, there's no cinnamon sugar, sadly. They're just kind of like a limeish green color.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, because they're so big and floppy, when you're walking up to the tree, like from afar, they kind of have this like layered kind of appearance where you have this big floppy thing kind of laying on top of this big floppy thing with a little air in between.
Yeah.
And so they don't really have like a very delicate shape. They're very like big, disky kind of trees where they just have these big like they kind of stack on top of each other in my opinion.
It looks like a pile of leaves.
It does, yeah.
Like that would find on the ground.
That's a great description, yeah. Except they're in the air, happily growing.
Yes.
Yeah. And the tips of these leaves are very pointed, so they kind of like angle down with these tips that that we call them drip tips.
Drip tips.
Yeah, have you ever heard this?
No, but it sounds like something a young person would say.
Oh, yeah, it's what they get on their hair or something, right?
Yeah, that fool's got drip tips.
Yeah, that's perfectly it. You sound just like a young person. It's essentially the term they used for like tropical plants, and they have this like little pointed tip in the water, hits the leaf and then goes off and drips right off the tip.
Okay.
So a lot of plants have it, so it's not really unique to the tropics, but all tropical plants tend to have this kind of thing, like many of them. So the Catalpa's got this. It's adorable, and they're oppositely or tri-oppositely arranged around the stem.
Tri-oppositely.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the right term. I should probably use whorled is really the right idea, because if you have alternate, opposite, then anything that is all coming from the same node at the same time that's more than 2, you'd probably call that whorled, which is a WHORLE.
Well, that explains why they look so full.
Yeah, right.
Instead of your normal, what I would say normal, average 2-leaf opposite arrangement.
Yeah.
We got a 3-leaf opposite arrangement here.
That's exactly right.
That's cool.
So they have these big twigs. They grow really widely spaced, and it's really like it has its handsomeness to it. But I'm going to say it's not the cleanest of trees.
Before we move on from the leaf, I want to throw one other term in there. These leaves are cordate.
Ah, yes, they are. Great job. They're heart-shaped.
Which means heart-shaped.
That's exactly right. I did skip over that.
Almost perfectly so.
Yeah, they really are, and that's kind of one of the things about them is they tend not to get a little extra lobe on it. The other one that's common is the northern Catalpa, which is Catalpa speciosa, and that tends to get a little bit of a second or third little pointed tip on the side. So you would call it a lobe, but it's more like just a kind of one point kind of thing.
Like a mitten formation?
Yeah, but like a mitten with the smallest thumb you've ever seen.
Okay.
Yeah, and the smallest fingers, I have to admit also. But the leaves are still huge, but it's just this tiny little like bloop, bloop, and that's it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they have a slight pubescence, a little hairy on the veins, especially on the bottom side, and they have these big terminal clusters of flowers called a panicle, and it's just gorgeous. Basically, a panicle is like a set of flowers that goes up and then has branches that come off and then branches from that. So they come up and they go pop, 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 and they look like a big circular kind of cone triangle looking shape, and they are so beautiful.
Yeah, man.
I just think they're great. They're like these big tube flowers that kind of come out and have this like purple throat and then this white sheath of petals that go around it.
Wow, well
and they just
said,
kind
Casey.
Of open up. Oh, I love them. Have you seen these pictures?
Yes. I don't know if I've ever seen. I know of the southern. I have seen a southern Catalpa in real life, but I don't think it was blooming.
Oh yeah, when it's blooming, it's stunning. It really is.
These flowers are something else, man.
Yeah, they really are. They're so beautiful, and you don't really think twice about them. And then when you like sit down and look at them for a second, you're like, wow,
yeah,
that's actually really, really stunning.
I feel like a lot of the trees we cover have kind of utility flowers.
Yeah, oh, they totally do.
This is not a utility. This is an aesthetic flower.
That's exactly right.
And I will say also the inside of the flower.
Yeah.
It looks like modern art or something. Like
Oh.
it looks like somebody designed it and painted it.
Yeah, it does. You could see this in a puzzle or something.
Yeah, it's really, really nice.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, that's really the thing that stuns about this tree, other than the bark and the way the whole tree grows. I should say before we get there, the fruit of this looks like a pea pod. It is not a pea pod. It is in fact like a long pod that has seeds in it that look like little mustaches, like the Lorax's mustache.
Yeah.
Where it like comes out and it's really wispy on the ends, but it's very like horizontal almost.
Mm-hmm.
That is what the fruit looks like. It's these little like papery seeds with these very the seeds are not papery. They have seeds with these papery growths along it, like these little wings.
Yeah.
And they lay down all next to each other, laying perpendicular or parallel to each other inside this little pea pod. And you break this little pea pod open, then they go flutter, 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 and they flutter away. So it's not technically a pea pod, but it looks just like a pea pod. So everyone thinks that they are pea pods.
What is it technically?
It is just a pod. It's another potted fruit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the fruits would be just long pods are what we'd call them. So I'm trying to think if they would be anything else. I don't think there's any other like term we could use for it. It's just a pod.
That's fine.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think.
They split open on their own, right?
They do. Yeah.
Okay.
They split open, and I think they have 2 or 3 suture lines. So they will break and kind of open up and split in a couple ways, and then those seeds now are very papery and dried out, and they just go flutter, 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 and flutter away. Yeah, they're really lovely, but they're kind of like, who cares? We'll see those later. You see a tree that lost its leaves in the fall. It has all these long stringy pods hanging from it.
Yeah.
But the bark on this tree is really what sells me. The bark and the form of it. They tend to be, people say not long lived. I've heard people say they're kind of brittle wooded and kind of throw a little shade at them. I think they're spectacular trees. I think their bark grows up and it has this utility and this like gorgeousness to it, kind of like a ponderosa pine, where it's really there to solve a problem, but it also has this like this attractiveness to it. It's just it's just sublime. You can't really describe it.
Let's try.
Let's do our dangest. So they usually come up with a kind of dark brownish, grayish outer bark.
Yeah.
And then as the tree grows, it gets this really like bright orange bark in the new areas inside the furrows between these ridges, and so you get this like dark gray with these like the highlights of orange in between.
Wow.
And it tends to like circle and arc around, like rotate around the tree where they grow up and circle around.
Oh, so it doesn't the striations, is that the right word?
Yeah, I think you could go that far.
What is a striation again?
A striation, in my understanding, is more. It would define something more where it's a really thin bark tree with like the same ridges, like it's the same formation that you get with a ridge or a furrow where the bark's kind of splitting. But a striation is really, really thin. Like it's a ridge or a furrow that is like really, really thin.
Okay, I guess I was using that. I was using that correctly as I thought, but it's maybe not like anyway. So it does. This looks like the furrows are like twisted as it goes up like a spiral staircase.
Exactly. Yeah. Or it looks like the whole grain of the tree kind of goes up.
Why does it grow like that?
Well, a lot of trees grow that way in situations where there are forces that are making it twist. So it's not that it twists the tree; it's that once you get twisted, you get little cracks in the wood that then are in a twisted. It's a torsional crack system because when trees have wind hit them, they bend backwards, but they also rotate left and right. So you get this like rotational bend, like the wave of the Queen.
We've talked about that before.
Yeah, and so that little rotational bend then makes those same kind of rotational breaks. So then the tree has to respond and then build these little extra rotational wood that takes on this rotational pattern.
Okay.
Because that's where the wood was damaged. So when it repairs the damage. It then gets this funny looking grain.
So once it starts bending like that or twisting like that, it can't It has to just live like that.
No. If it stops blowing, if it stops having that little damage, like that stimulus, then it stops growing that way. Then it'll just start straightening its grain out, because now it's just growing straight grain tree where it's just bending very little. It's just going for it.
I see.
The other thing is it does build strength. I think the example I give is holding a piece of paper upright, and it's just going to flop over. But then if you you scrunch it up and you twist it into a nice little tight spiral, you can hold it up really strong. So it creates a lot more strength for the tree itself. So you see it on trees that usually grow in wildly high wind areas. So a catalpa generally doesn't do that. It just kind of has a twisty effect to it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know why it does it, but that's just the way it grows, I suppose.
Yeah.
However, the other thing about it is that they just tend to not decay, and if they do decay, then they get a wound on them or something, they will continually grow and connect. So you can wound one really hard, and it will be like, meh, I'm fine. And it'll just keep on growing from all these other connections, build up these new like ribs coming around trying to close over those wounds. So you get like on old trees, you get this really like interesting rotational bark that's dead over here, that's not over there, that's really thick, that has these like striations in it, and they're just very striking to me.
Wow.
Yeah, so I want to say, I think your striation comment makes sense. It's just a matter of depth, you know? So you can have, a deep striation is generally called a furrow. A non-one, we just call striation. So I think it's 6 dozen, 6 here, a dozen there. 6 here, 6 one way, half a dozen the other. Oh, there we go, we got there.
You know what's interesting about you, Casey?
What?
You know, when I can't think of what to say, I stop speaking so I can think.
Where are you going? Are you saying I also do that?
You talk through your thoughts. I think I've just learned the words to put to this phenomenon.
Sorry.
It's not a bad thing, but it does stress me out.
I know it does. Sorry.
Sorry to say this on mic. I can edit that out.
No, never do. Never do.
Casey's blushing.
I know, it's because I'm like, well, yeah, I do. I talk through my thoughts. I have to learn how to not talk through my thoughts, because then I'm like, okay, someone might get really mad if I do. If I talk through, here's where I'm coming to this conclusion. Sometimes I have to be like, do this internally, Casey.
Well, you're just doing what they taught us to do in middle school, which is to write out your process.
Yeah, there you go.
But you're doing it verbally.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, so yes, the striation deal may be on point, but you just different term, just a slightly bastardized version of the term.
Precisely.
Okay, moving on from that.
Moving on. So that's essentially, I think that's how you could identify the catalpa.
Great.
These big giant leaves. They don't get very tall, maybe like 40 or 50 feet tall. These are low kind of wide growing trees. The one that we were talking about walking under near our restaurant Monte Lupa.
Yeah, Lupo.
That is a old one. Like, it must be 3 or 4 feet in diameter. It's growing along the street.
It's a big one.
It's underneath power lines. It's right over a building. The restaurant building next door, I think it's EPIF, E-P-I-F. They actually cut their building facade out on the top, so the branch didn't have to be removed, and they could build their building right underneath it.
Yeah, instead of trimming the tree, they trimmed the building. Pretty. That is so Portland.
Yeah.
It's that's such a specific...
it's so good. Remember when we were talking about like European tree care, like the idea of that? It's like, I think that's on the realm where it's like, no, this tree's so much more important and permanent than this building.
Yeah.
Let's just cut the building out. Like, who cares?
Yeah, it's just a little piece of the facade. It's not like not a integral part of the building.
Yeah, exactly. If
Structural.
if I can find my picture of it, we'll post it with this episode.
God, it's just a beautiful tree.
It is. It's so beautiful.
And it grows up. Like, it's kind of tall. I mean, it's not like super tall. Maybe it's tall for a catalpa.
Yeah, maybe, but it's not huge.
Yeah, but it grows mostly out. I mean, it's sprawling.
Well, and half that's because it's underneath the power line, so it can't really grow up. It has to continue growing out. And then there's a big branch break a couple years ago. Whole branch fell off, and then a bunch of arborists got together and were like, we cannot cut this tree down. This is an amazing tree. We can retain it. And the city, I consulted with one of my other city arborists, and we were like, can we remove it? Can we keep it? Like, what's the best thing here? And so I was brought in, and we basically sat down and like independently did an assessment on this tree for the situation. read over some reports from some other private arborists, and we decided, yes, we can keep this tree.
Yeah.
Because it's just such an amazing old tree. And these arborists came, they said, we can do this. And they did an incredible job pruning the tree. You're going to have to always come back, but it still has, like, even though it's lost this giant limb and it's been pruned back severely because you had to reduce the weight and like do these certain things to it, it still is this massive, huge spreading tree.
Yeah. It's truly, I mean, we went there one night for dinner and I was just so taken aback. Like, I had never seen a tree like that.
Yeah, that's the Catalpa thing. You've never seen a tree like that, even though you've seen 100 trees bigger, taller, wider, everything.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, a Catalpa has that je ne sais quoi.
I'd like to give out an award here.
Oh, okay, please do.
To the Catalpa leaf.
Ah.
I would like to give the Catalpa leaf a Crowson stump of approval.
Fagoosh.
Yeah.
That's so good. Honestly, I want to hear like an applause. Like, we have an award. Everyone, hold on.
Yeah.
And like bring out a pedestal and all this stuff.
It's like a bronze stump.
A bronze stump. Now that's going to be something. We'll send out the Stumpies.
The
Stumpy
Stumpies!
Awards. Yeah.
Casey.
Put that on the long list of what we're going to be doing.
Wow. Copywriting that.
Yeah, please do. So the Catalpa, as you said, or as we said earlier, the name of it is Catalpa bignonioides, right?
Yeah.
Now, that is named after the bignonia, and the bignonia is what we used to call the scientific name for the trumpet vine. Have you seen these?
Boy, I don't know. I guess I'll Google it.
Yeah, I bet you have, but they're these gorgeous vining plants that come up with these really long flowers that look like trumpets, like these long tubes that come out with these open flowers. They look very similar to the Catalpa flower.
They do. I have seen these, Casey. You know where I've seen them?
Where?
In the garden scene in Alice in Wonderland.
Oh my God.
All the flowers sing to her.
Yeah, I was like, are they actually trumpets at that point?
I think they might. Yeah, I think they might be.
Okay, yeah. Well, they used to be bignonia. Now that is Campsis radicans is the name of the trumpet vine.
Oh, wow, they changed it.
Yeah, so they changed the genus. However, the family still exists. I don't know what bignonia is now, but bignoniaceae, is the family of Catalpas. Mm-hmm. And the family of Catalpas has almost exclusively vining things in the tropics. There's also some like little herb kind of plants that grow here, but the whole family, they're all very closely related. Like Pinaceae, the pine family, they're all really, really closely related, and you can see the differences and the similarities, pretty simply, pretty easily. You can do the same thing with everything in the Bignoniaceae. However, there are only 11 species of Catalpa that we know of. And those are flowering trees, and they're big trees. They're usually tall shrubs or trees in their own right. Mm-hmm. And the thing about their whole family is that the rest of it is all these vines called lianas. Have you heard of that term?
No.
Well, yeah, have you seen Tarzan?
Yes.
You know how in the tropics, like the classic thing is these big vines coming from the trees?
Yeah.
Those are lianas.
Lianas are swinging vines.
They are, exactly. They're a lot of figs and tropical other things grow as
Casey,
lianas.
I started picturing this in my head, and I thought, oh, that sounds like a strangler fig, like an aerial root.
Exactly. It's the opposite of the aerial root, though, in that it's not coming from the top down. It is a vine growing up the side of a tree. But the one thing about it, it's very similar to wisteria. It gets woody as hell. Like it's not a thing that's just like, well, let's just like grow up and stay really thin. They become these big honking pieces of wood.
It's like a long vertical branch.
Yeah, exactly. And it circuitously goes up into the canopy till it finds its place. Some will send out tendrils, some kind of spiral around stuff, and some have actual radicans, which are little roots that connect onto the top of something.
Yeah.
They don't suck any nutrients. It's like English ivy. They just hold on to it.
Okay.
So that is the thing about this whole family, is that there appears that this family, Bignoniaceae, has what's called is what's called a clade. You're familiar with that term, right?
Yes.
Now, clade is, can you explain it so everyone knows?
So a clade is on the family tree of species.
Yeah.
Where if you clip it off, this is what you've taught me.
If
you clip it off a clade at any point. A clade is everything on the branch that you clipped off.
Exactly.
So it's like
Perfect.
It's not like so like all pines are a part of a clade.
Yes, exactly. And
But then like if you take it a step up, all trees are part of a clade.
no. Alex,
I took a swing, Casey.
I'm so happy you took that swing.
Wow.
Because today we're talking about the reason that last statement that you just said is patently false.
Hey, I did it on purpose. Find out more after the break. We'll be right back with more Completely Arbortrary. Welcome back to Completely Arbortrary. Today we're talking the southern Catalpa. We're also talking the bignonioides family.
Yes,
Casey.
precisely.
Before the break, you teased the fact that the Catalpa is a bit of a black sheep of the family. As most of these things in this family
Yeah.
are vines,
Yes.
flowers,
Little
Casey,
herbs.
little herbs
Yeah.
in the jungle. Casey, what's happening here?
Well, you remember last week I said that next week we're going to be talking about some pedantic bullshit.
Yes, that's right.
But then I just said that your statement of all trees are a clade is patently false.
Yeah.
So that is what we're talking about today. So taxonomy, last week's episode,
Yes.
we basically said you can see and naturally put things into groups based on what they look like, right? And taxonomy historically has been this like this thing where you look at the characteristics of a plant. The fruit and the flower is what most people would do now. And then we would look at those characteristics and we say, well, hey, that looks like this, therefore it is this. And then we'd put it into a family and we'd add it into this categorization network that we already have. Mm-hmm. So if you try to do that and you'd say, well, what we're going to do is, or what we have assumed is all the plants are part of like one group. All the mammals are part of one group and all these other things are part of one group. And those represent clades where at one point, theoretically, there was a mammal, a thing that would have been a mammal or a precursor to a mammal that then mammals developed from.
The proto-mammal.
The proto-mammal, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then that represents a clade where there's that one single common ancestor that produced all the mammals. So the mammalian things like having and producing milk, having hair, those things developed one single time. And then everything that has those characteristics, those all came from that one time it evolved.
Okay.
Trees and famously fish is where this people have talked about are not quite the same. Everyone would say, that's a fish. It's in the water. It's a fish. And it's like, okay, well, is it a fish? Was there one proto-fish? And then all fish came from that one proto-fish. And, theoretically, we're really simplifying it, but obviously that's kind of what we're doing here.
That's what we do.
Yeah, thank you. The answer, it turns out, is no. Where if you take the example I found was a lungfish.
Okay.
It looks like a fish. It acts like a fish. Obviously, it has this big thing into it that is It looks like it has a weirdness to it, right?
Good God.
Yeah, it looks kind of like an eel, doesn't it?
It looks like an eel catfish, but then I also see this photo or this illustration of it out of the water, just on a white background.
I see that. It looks like it's like things are on the ground or something.
It looks like a fucking alien race.
Yeah, it does. But at the same time, it looks pretty much like a fish.
But yeah, it looks
right?
like a fish. Yeah.
So there's also there's one of these little things, and this is from Britannica, the African lungfish. There is the Devonian lungfish, and which they had found, I guess, in some. It's probably from the Devonian period, so it's probably found in fossils.
Oh wow!
And then they have the South American lungfish, the African lungfish, and the Australian lungfish. They all look like fishes. Like you would look at them like, yeah, that's a fish.
Yeah.
Turns out that this is actually more closely related to a camel than it is a salmon.
Casey, what?
Yeah, Alex, there you go.
That's fake news.
Well, you want fake news, Alex. What about if I tell you birds aren't real?
Okay, well, we've received some emails about this.
Okay, all right. I'll admit the last one was a literal troll.
And I've seen the things. I don't even bother to dive into it because I know it's going to be pedantic bullshit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take a real quick left turn. Have you heard actually about this movement that birds don't exist?
Like an actual like kind of flat Earth conspiracy that birds don't exist,
kind of,
and that they're like cameras used by the FBI.
That's it. Yeah. You have heard about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll put a thing to this. Last night I was driving home. I was getting ready for this episode, and then the story came on the Daily from New York Times, and I listened to it, and it is literally this guy who started this movement, which is like movement in quotes, called birds aren't real.
Yeah.
And he did it because he just like went to a protest and just like held up a random sign, just be like, yeah, I'm going to join. What I'm going to say. And he wrote this down, birds aren't real. Okay. And he created this entire idea.
Yes.
And then it like took off in like 2016. Everyone was like, yeah, birds aren't real. But it's like a fake misinformation campaign to kind of like draw the attention about other real like fake information campaigns.
It's a conspiratorial conspiracy.
Yes. But the guy knows it's a joke. He's doing it as a joke. Everyone who's involved, it's kind of
ironic.
Like, yeah, it's one of those ironic internet things where if you're into it and you get it, you kind of get it.
Yeah, it kind of it has the flavor of something that somebody made up to be for some like comedy purpose,
right? Because this is not this is not pedantic bullshit. Birds exist.
Yes,
and in fact, birds are a clade. Every bird that is a bird came from the proto-bird.
A bird.
Yes. So birds are real. They are not government things, and it's a hilarious thing. But it's also like very well done in terms of like, wow, you're actually accomplishing something. So back on the road, go listen to. This thing, we'll post a thing to it. It's the Daily from February 9th, I believe.
Okay.
But, so, sorry, I was just trying to, you were getting pushed, and I wanted to, like, make sure you fell off that edge of, what's real, what's not real.
Right.
So, sorry, that last one was a fake push. It's not real. Birds are, in fact, real and they exist.
Okay, so if I had looked into it, I would have immediately learned that it was a joke.
Exactly.
All right.
And then there's another flat Earth thing where you found this actually when I first brought this up, where the flat Earthers basically, this is from the Atlantic. It says flat Earthers have a wild new theory about forests where they say real trees, in quotes, no longer exist at all. And they take mesas and the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. If you look that up, you'll see, and it's this old volcanic thing that looks like a tree stump. Like it looks like a gigantic tree stump.
Looks like the stump of Yggdrasil.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it looks like. So some people apparently back again in 2016 when it was the height of conspiracies, they said that essentially that is the size that trees used to be, and with some crazy thing that happened like millions of years ago, this bad demon whatever, they cut down all the big trees, took them away, and they're like some extraterrestrial thing, and all of the rock, every mountain, everything that exists is in fact an old piece of wood in some way that is now just slowly decaying, and it's turned into rock. It's kind of a funny thing. You read through that article. We'll also post that.
I have to interrupt with something from my world, Casey.
Please do.
And when I say my world, I mean the world of Warcraft, which I do not play anymore.
Hey, it's okay if you do.
I almost had a relapse last week.
Oh, God.
Because I needed to escape reality. But I held true to myself. In World of Warcraft, one of the playable races is the Night Elf.
Okay.
The Night Elves come from a place called Teldrassil or something. And so when you start playing a Night Elf in the starting zone of the RPG, you run. It's a big forest.
Yeah.
Glittery and glowy, an avatar-like place, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing quests, whatever. You go to the next little zone and you're doing the quest there. Then you go down a road and you're still in the same forest. And when you hit the map button to look at your map, when you get to this certain place, you'll notice that the edge of the continent you're on is the edge, the margin of a tree stump.
Oh,
and you learn
no way.
that this entire, miles and miles of zone exist on the base of a tree stump.
That is so funny.
Yeah, it's great. And
Holy
like
shit.
it's one of those like, oh shit, like you realize, you know,
Yeah.
an hour into the game that you're existing on the top of a giant tree stump.
That is exactly what they're talking about in this article, dude.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah, it looks much like this. too.
Yeah. So they say trees don't exist because all the trees, just like in this this world, is there. Though they look to us like trees, it would be like a piece of grass from an ant. Where it's
Right.
like, yeah, it's huge, but like to everything else in that relativity, it's not. It's tiny.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's it's a perfect example. Your world, our world, they collide.
There you have it.
However, we're going to get back to what we're actually talking about.
Boo!
Oh, come on, everyone, sit down.
I want to talk about Darnassus.
Is that the name of the land?
It's the name of the Night Elf capital city.
Oh, okay. So, all right. This is why it's pedantic. Have you heard of the idea of cladistics?
Cladistics, but I'm assuming it has to do with clades.
It does.
Okay.
So in our last week's story about taxonomy, we basically said, well, we're going to put all these things in the families, and everyone wants to get that right. So they took the cypresses and they ripped them apart and they put them back together, and they said, well, where do they land?
Right.
How are those branches on the family tree oriented? What do they look like?
You know what? They're grafting branches on the family tree.
Yeah, they totally are all the time, and that's the mad scientists.
Wow.
You can't include them on the family tree. You got to cut them out.
Right.
Like a disease. So the family tree, and we'll use this reference, I think, because it's easy, is essentially the cladistics say you cannot include something in a group or a clade, and the clade, as these taxonomists are trying to figure out, how do we become a science? Cladistics, these people who study this and like are taxonomists in the most like modern sense of the term, they say everything needs to be organized by like scientific molecular clades. You cannot put something if it is not close enough related, which I still don't know like what the degrees of difference are, like, you know, how, if they are really close related or they're kind of close related, or they're like very distantly related, like where's the line there?
So the cladistic people are talking DNA.
Essentially, yeah.
They want to like test the DNA of all these instead of saying this looks enough like this to put in this family.
Yeah.
Okay.
They want to make sure that everything is the only way, and they are very firm about this. The only way that you can say that something is accurately placed on this family tree of life is by the clade. So if you clip something, everything below that must be in that order. If you don't, then that term doesn't exist because it's not real. So this is where people come down to the trees and the fish, where a group, like if we said as a taxonomic group, you have trees and you have grasses and you have this and you have that. You have fish, you have birds. As taxonomic groups, they would say, and this is where the pedanticness comes through, that grouping does not exist as a taxonomic phylogenetic singularity. Does that make sense?
Oh boy.
You see okay, so I'm seeing it click where you're just like, oh, I see what you're saying.
Opposite.
No.
I don't understand.
Okay, let me give you the example.
I don't understand these people.
Yeah, well, I
don't understand this concept.
It's the pedanticness of it, where you have to really like dumb yourself down and be like, what exactly are you saying here?
I'm putting myself on their level.
So the Catalpa, why we chose this tree is because essentially there is a big family of plants. And some of those plants evolved to become a tree, but most of them stayed as these weird vines. A couple of them are these large things.
And so this is the nonioides.
Yeah, bignoniaceae.
Okay.
Yeah. So then the question is, what was first? What was the very first bignoniaceae family member?
Okay.
Was it a tree, and then the other things evolved away from trees to lianas, and then down to a shrub? Essentially, as this article that we're going to do, which also I should note came from my good friend Gabe, who sent me this article, and this is like, got these wheels really spinning.
Shout out to Gabe.
Shout out Gabe. Which came first, the dandelion or the redwood, is kind of the question they have. So in what we're talking about here, was the first bignoniaceae, was that a small little herb that then became lianas that then became a tree? Was it a tree that then became lianas and then became an herb? Was it a liana that then split off and became a tree and split off and became an herb?
Sure.
So essentially, it's evolving different strategies. Strategy A, tree. Strategy B, liana. Strategy C, herb.
Okay.
And the aster family has this as well. There are tree-like asters, but asters are also the same thing that are dandelions and daisies. Those are all in the aster family.
Also, didn't we mention a couple weeks ago the tea family?
Yeah.
Is like some herby plants and some trees.
Yeah, and like some shrubs, some bigger trees. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where we're getting at. So when you think about clades, if you want to include something in a clade, in a cohesive group, then it has to be in a clade. That's what the cladistics are arguing. So when you're thinking about it, like, okay, sure, trees are a clade. As you said before, like a tree is a clade. They would be like, no.
Right.
Not in any way. And here's why. If you take everything that is a tree and you put that into a pile, or rather you want to clip off the branch that includes everything that is a tree, you also have to include everything that is a grass, everything that is a shrub, everything that is a small herb. Dogwoods, there's a little tiny herb dogwood called Cornus, it's called bunchberry, Cornus canadensis. It does not get more than like 2 inches tall.
But it's related to the dogwood.
Exactly, which gets huge, 80 feet, really woody.
Interesting.
So that is their problem, where they say if you want to include one thing, if you want to include all fish, all the things that we call fish, the lungfish, then you also have to include all the mammals and all the camels and all the other things, because those have a branch that connects further down the line on the tree than the branch that connects those things back to fish and all the rest of the fish things.
Interesting. Okay, so... Oh, that's what you meant when you said a lungfish is more closely related to a camel.
Yes.
Because they're in the same clade.
Yes, they share a more closely related clade. Well, and you can make a clade anything. It's just you have a branch that splits off. You could cut it on any one of those splits all the way down to the tiniest little thing.
A clade is not... Okay, I think the problem here... The reason I'm not following all that closely is because I have a few fundamental misunderstandings.
Okay. Let's see. We can dial them back.
A clade, misunderstanding number one, correction. Yeah. A clade is not like family, genus, species. It's not like a defined thing.
Yes.
A clade can be any size of group.
Yes.
Anywhere on the family tree.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's a clade is just a broad term, a non-specified term that means any group of living things
that are all share one common ancestor.
Yes.
Correct.
Which is so a clade could be every living thing in the world because we all have a shared ancestor.
Boom. That's
like
a clade, baby. Yes.
Okay.
All plants are a clade.
Yes.
And then as you start to split that down and go down, say, okay, let's now take all plants and then take a left towards gymnosperms. Those are all a clade. Go right towards the angiosperms. Those are all a clade.
Okay.
But then once you start branching out from there, the branches get really complicated.
Yes. Okay. So we have these big hallmark clades, the primordials at the top.
That's exactly right.
And then we have, I'm pointing to this giant family tree of Greek mythology behind me. At the top, which is like angiosperm, gymnosperm.
Yeah. Let's say it. I don't want to say 100% yes because we're talking so pedantically. Someone's going to be like, oh, no. So
70%.
Yes, generally.
And then a little bit further down, they get more complicated because the lines start to blur a little bit.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. Now, I'm going to show you this thing right here, and this is from our last week's episode.
Okay, Casey is showing me a graph of sorts.
Yes, they call it a phylogram.
A phylogram.
Yeah, which is a phylogeny descriptor.
It looks like a sports betting bracket.
Yeah, exactly. And it's color-coded, and those colors represent clades. Okay. So this one is the blue one, and that is these certain cypress trees up here. Those all are connecting like this bracket where you follow the bracket back to the single ancestor where they split off. So way up here, there's kind of these two big clades, and they call these paraphyletic, which means they both go next to each other as they're evolving. And then monophyletic, which means they all evolve from one thing.
I think the problem with me, Casey, not the problem with me. The problem with my understanding of the subject is that it's scientific, but it's also pretty abstract.
Yes, it really is.
Because it's and obviously if like people are arguing over it, like, you know, nobody argues over the fact that gravity exists. Like that's something we can all agree on. But this kind of thing where science gets like people are like take different camps and shit.
Yeah, apparently even in this there was very much like a break off from the modern cladists and the old school. Neocladists and the old folk.
Wow. Yeah, see, I don't know. I even standing on the edge of that field, I'm like, nah, I'm good. I don't want to go play.
I think that's totally reasonable. And I mean, most people are turned off by that because they're like, you're being pedantic to be pedantic. Like that's the thing that makes people be like, oh God, science is so stupid.
I mean, cladism sounds kind of inherently pedantic.
Yeah, it kind of does.
We already have a way to order all of these things.
Yeah,
and that works really well.
Right, and all they're doing is they're saying, yes, we are still doing that same thing, but they're adding a level of scientific rigor to it that means like, okay, if you're going to get to this level of rigor, then you got to accept all these other things that come along with it. The sort of, not assumptions, but the if this, then that. So if you want to go the scientific route that they're going, and they're specifically doing it in a way that is, we're going to do a molecular study, and they also go down and do what's called a evolutionary, what is the term? The molecular clock. They use this hypothesis. Have you heard this?
No.
We talked about it for a second, but I didn't have a really good descriptor of
molecular clock.
Yeah, and we talked about this in the episode about hickories. I said I didn't know when the hickories split off from the walnuts, and I don't know how they figured it out. But it turns out that this is what they do. It's a hypothesis that the DNA and protein sequences evolve at a rate that is relatively constant over time and throughout different species.
Okay.
So essentially, you can say, well, how many mutations have happened? Each one of them happened at X amount of time. So if we see 20 times X amount of time, it means that this is when they were probably together.
Oh, so it's suggesting, the molecular clock is suggesting that evolution has like a tempo.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's a theory.
Relatively.
Yeah, and it kind of gives you an idea, like, okay, I can estimate based on this assumed tempo.
Okay.
And so they take this and they take the like doing science and they like do all this cross dating, it's like DNA analysis, all these different trees and things. And then boom, they come up with that phylogenetic graph that I showed you earlier that says, okay, per the numbers, these two are most closely related to each other, but these two are more closely related to this one, more closely blah, 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 blah. And then they go through the whole thing.
Okay.
So that is how you come up with this graph, and then that's when they say, so that's why we have to switch these things around, and that's where this is a clade within species. This is a clade within subspecies of species.
Oh boy.
This is a clade within subgenus, and then they add that all up to the big one that says this is a full clade of all these trees. Things outside of that should be their own thing over here, or they're like more distantly evolved even so. So that's that's why it's kind of important, where you're like, okay, all right. Now, Alex, I know you're begging. What does this have to do with the Catalpa?
Can I take a guess?
You may.
I think maybe, and I am 70. See, you're 70-30 is that you have 70 correct and 30 maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Mine, I think, is reversed.
Yeah. All right. Sure.
So is it that maybe catalpas are not trees because they're not part of a clade that also contains trees or something?
You're not quite there.
Okay.
Sorry, you're 30%. You're in your 70% right now.
I thought so.
What it means is, or why we chose the Catalpa, is because if you look at the plants in Bignoniaceae and you say you are all plants, you're all phylogenetically connected to one previous ancestor.
Yeah.
So you are one clade. But within that clade, some of you have evolved strategies that best work for your survival. You evolved the strategy to climb like a vine. You evolved the strategy to just stay really small, never put any work into developing lignin or anything that makes you big, strong, tough. Secondary xylem. You decided you're never going to do that. You're going to be a small herb.
Okay.
You, over here, Catalpa, you took the evolutionary strategy of saying, yeah, I'm gonna grow wood, and then I'm going to get big, and I'm going to use that wood to self-support, as opposed to the lianas that use it almost just to keep themselves from falling or breaking apart.
Right.
So the idea in the cladistic sense of it, in where someone says trees don't exist, it's meaning in a phylogenetic sense, trees as a clade do not exist. Trees, the act of being a tree, is a strategy of plant survival. It's not, in fact, a thing that developed and then there was a first tree and then every tree after that came from that. And they show this. We'll post another article where they talk about this. Where they call it insular evolution, or I'm sorry, insular woodiness, where a bunch of small herb plants grow on an island, and then over millions of years, those herb plants basically grow into trees and start developing tree-like things. They get their secondary xylem, which is the wood that puts on the rings. They grow upright, obviously, but they keep growing upright, and they put this extra tough wood on, and they become big and tall and strong. Then they are still within that same family, say the cornices, that Cornus candensis, the bunchberry. If that bunchberry was put in a situation and given a couple million years, it might be like, I'm going to flip on this gene that woodies and lignifies my growth, and then I'm going to have move some things around, and then I'll put my flowers at the end of these big woody stems rather than at this terminus of this little not woody stem.
And become a dogwood tree.
And become a dogwood tree, precisely.
So, okay, I need to stop, Casey.
We're done.
We just need to stop for a second, and I need to process some things.
Okay.
What you're saying is that these dirty cladists are suggesting that trees aren't the word tree isn't like what we know as a word tree. It's not like a thing.
Yeah.
It's a strategy.
Correct.
It's a
means of being a thing.
It's not a car, it's a highway.
I don't know about that, but yeah, okay, maybe.
It made sense when I said it.
Yeah.
Somebody will be like, yeah, man.
That is essentially what I'm saying.
Okay. It's a way of being. It's not a being, it's a way of being.
That is it, Alex.
There we go.
And that is the pedantic bullshit of it, where when they say trees don't exist, they mean it in this very specific, stupid context.
It's clickbait. It's
it totally
a clickbait
is.
argument.
It totally is, but it's such a good, I'm reading the University of Chicago Press journals about,
You know what, Casey, though? Yeah. After all that, I like it.
Yeah. Now you're a cladist. Well, that's the end, the not logical end, but that's the ecosystem destruction of taxonomy.
Yeah.
Where you follow it from its very beginnings, where it has this gorgeous, the Umwelt, where you're looking at it and you put it all together, and someone said, well, let's do it this one way, and everyone's like, that's a great way.
Yes.
You have these folk taxonomies and all this really interesting humanness of interacting with the world.
Yeah.
And then you add in the scientific rigor of computing and DNA, and all of a sudden you're like, no. We're taking that out of your hands, your immediate experience. We're going to tell you if the DNA tells us that this is a real thing, and then we're going to completely destroy your entire obvious knowledge about things. And it's you guys are so, I get it, fine, but I'm not inviting you to my parties.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, that's
we've reached taxonomic Ragnarok.
Yeah, we have.
This is Revelations.
Yes, this is perfect.
And Judgment Day is coming. Casey, let's give our review of the Southern Catalpa.
Sounds good.
Here's how it works. We're going to give her some final thoughts on this here tree.
That's right.
Then we're going to give it a cone score, 0 to 10, golden cones of honor. I feel so bad for any new listeners who are getting used to this idea.
Oh God, no! That's welcome. It's the good news is it's an easy thing to do. It's not. There's not all right. If you're new, here are the rules, and you have to explain these complex things.
This is interesting because you say it's an easy thing to do.
Uh-huh.
But we've gotten a lot of new people emailing us saying, I don't understand why you guys do the review part at the end.
What's the cone? I don't get it.
Doesn't
That's
it take
fair.
away from the importance of the trees?
Yes.
To which I say, oh my God, yeah, that's the fucking point.
I know.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not coming after anybody. Their cones are their own, just as ours
Exactly.
are ours.
If everything has a 10, that is also okay. Or if
Yeah.
everything has a 0, is that ultimately the same thing?
Listen, everything's fucking pointless. We all know this.
Exactly.
Casey, with that, please, as our resident expert, we begin with you.
Makes me happy to hear you say everything's pointless after our intense conversation about the dynamics of lists and organizations.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't it all come down to that, though?
It does. It all comes down to it. Like,
Nothing matters.
The trees are all like, we already know this. Everyone knows this. Anyway.
Nature is loose.
Yeah, nature is
Don't try to
loose.
put it in a box, man.
Thank you, Alex. I won't. So let's see. To try to put this tree in a box that's from a 0 to a 10 in terms of cones, which are golden and honorable.
Yes.
Here's what I say: the Catalpa bignonioides, I love just as a tree. It's one of my top favorite trees. Whenever I see one in the city on the streets, I'm like, awesome, fantastic, great done. Every time I see a new one planted, I'm like, thank you for taking a step that everyone is afraid to do.
Wow.
Planting a catalpa. Catalpas are the best.
That goes a bit against your normal thing.
It does.
We say around here, but it's overplanted.
It is.
This is an underplanted tree.
This is correct. It's an underplanted tree.
Great.
Not to mention, when you do plant it, it is like stunningly good at doing growth. Like you just, once it's there, you can top the heck out of them. Some of my favorites are underneath power lines, and they just look so gnarly up the canopy. Not really good. It's been topped and hacked at for the power lines, but the lower trunks are just like beautiful.
Yeah.
So these trees, I think, are great. The fact that the catalpa, for me, represents the strategy of a tree, as opposed to it being like me and all of my like other trees, we came from this one thing. It's like, nah, I'm just like others in my family. I just kind of did this. Like, this is how I go about life. I think it's nice to think about them as not only being so beautiful, so good at what they do, so gorgeously underplanted, but I like the idea that you can also represent the catalpa as this idea of everyone can go their own way. I just happen to be this.
May I?
You may.
You can go your own way. Go your own way.
Yeah.
You can grow your own way.
You can grow your own way. Alex, spectacular.
Get our trademark lawyer on the phone, Casey.
Yes.
You can grow your own way merch coming soon. arbortrarypod.com/merch.
I think I'm going to give this an 8.4 Golden Cones of Honor.
That's great, Casey.
I think it's a great treat. The flowers, stunning.
Yeah.
Look it up. If you see it happen, and you see it happen in relativity to another one, the first one that came out is our tree, Catalpa bignonioides. If it blooms later, that is a Catalpa speciosa. There you go. Now you got the clues.
Good ID.
Don't tell anyone. That is under the radar.
Wow.
Anyway, Alex, that's what I say. What do you think?
You have a really... Never mind. I've already been hard enough on you calling out not flaws, but just like personality quirks.
Caseyisms, you know?
I was going to do it again, but I'm going to hold off.
All right. You never have to, just to be clear.
All right, I'll say it. You cannot help yourself.
What?
You're so good at explaining things in this great narrative, and you have a perfect climax. And you wrap it up nicely, and then you go, and I should say, and then some totally underwhelming thing right at the very end, totally undercutting your hard work.
Dang it.
Casey.
Alex, this is why I have you to cut my hard work where it needs to be.
I do edit these episodes, yeah.
You're the best.
I'm not going to edit that one so that people can understand what I'm talking
They
about.
can understand the hard work you go through every week.
It just makes me laugh. And I don't mean this in an insulting way. You know, like when you see a dog do something really funny, you just love it so much, and you're like, what are you doing?
You were doing so good before that. Well,
we just gave you a bath and you're rolling in the mud. Ugh, I can't stay mad at you.
I know. Okay, so this is, I like that illusion also.
Yeah.
It's like, well, here's Casey, beautiful and perfect, and then he just rolls in the mud.
Yeah. Casey, I'm pretty much right there with you.
Okay.
The Catalpa, for me, the big money here is that leaf.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it to death. I love a big-ass leaf. I think the flowers are gorgeous.
Okay.
I'm not much of a flower person. I can appreciate a flower.
Yeah.
But I don't get excited about flowers the same way I get excited about cones.
Oh.
And this one doesn't make a cone, so I'm gonna use my, oh, thanks, Casey. There's a million sounds all started happening at once right out my apartment window. So I'm gonna treat the flowers as I would a cone in my grading and say that they're okay.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
They're pretty though. I'll say this. That specimen over by Montelupo, the Montelupo Catalpa,
Yep.
is like one of my favorite trees I've ever like gotten up close and personal with.
100%.
It's grand. I mean, it's really grand.
Stately.
And it is just like it tells a story. Just looking at it, I'm like, wow, this thing has like seen some things, and it's really like rich.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of depth to just looking at that tree. It brings up a lot of like thoughts and it kind of works on your imagination a little bit. You go, I wonder how this.
That was a very good perspective for it.
Thanks. And the leaves are so. I mean, just like maybe it's the fact that they're so big and they come in threes. It looks so full and like a big, just like pile of pillows. You just want to like lay on it. I don't know.
Beautiful.
I'm pretty much right there with you. I'm gonna bump it up for a rounding error's sake. I'm gonna say 8.5 golden cones of honor for the Southern Catalpa.
Well done.
Yeah, well done, Catalpa.
What a tree.
What a tree. Yeah, well deserved, I think.
I think so. Well, it's a nice way to end this conversation.
Yeah.
With a good tree that everyone's like, yeah, this tree rocks.
Yeah, it's a good tree.
We're not going to look any deeper into the idea of tree.
Yeah.
We're going to keep it there. That tree rocks.
I'm saying it here. I think all those cladists, little cuckoo.
Yeah. Don't say it too loud.
Casey, it's time for a completely arbitrary Q&A.
All right. What do we got today, Alex?
This question came in as we were recording, hot off the presses.
Wow. Everyone, hold on. This just in.
Casey, this one's from Corey. Corey says, hello, completely arbitrators. I just listened to your Patreon episode about photosynthesis.
Okay.
And it left me with a question. It's my understanding that trees physically grow by absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and using the carbon atoms from that to build more biomass. So far, so good?
I think so, yeah.
Is that basically correct? And if so, is that process considered part of photosynthesis, or is it its own separate thing?
Well, the first thing we should say is, everyone, if you're curious what Corey's talking about, of course, join our Patreon.
Yeah.
And you can hear that we did a What is Photosynthesis edition. And so the broadest way to say this, I believe it is absolutely yes. So carbon is absorbed through the leaves in the chloroplast is where it kind of goes into. So the leaves take in carbon dioxide from the air through their stomatal pores in the bottom of the leaf. That is how it happens. So that carbon, CO2, is then ripped apart. The oxygen is taken off of it. Then the hydrogen from water, which is also ripped apart, is then put together to create essentially CH2O. And then that all CH2. It comes off to make a sugar. Hold on.
It makes, Casey is checking his chest tattoo of the photosynthesis.
What does that say?
I see CO2 plus H2O to CH2O. What's that last one?
O2.
Plus O2.
There you go. That's it. So that first CH2O kind of thing, that is essentially... it's essentially a sugar. I think technically that's like formaldehyde or something like that.
Interesting.
That little chemical. But you get big long chains of these things. So it'd be like C6H12O14 or O12, that kind of thing. So they're big long chain molecules.
Okay, is that like a simple sugar as opposed to like a long, what's that called?
Starch.
Oh.
That would be the thing. So the simple sugar would be the cellulose and the circulose, glucose, that kind of thing. And then the longer it gets, the more it becomes starchy. But also cellulose is technically just a big long chain sugar when you're looking at the technical, like, what it is.
How about that?
So that carbon comes directly from the air. So it sucks it out and then it breathes out oxygen. Breathes is, of course, not the right term, but that is what it emits as a byproduct of photosynthesis. And that is what builds biomass. If you are to put a tree in a pot and have that pot on a scale, and you're growing this tree in the pot, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the scale starts registering more and more and more. It gets heavier and heavier and heavier. Then you say, well, where is all this coming from? Is it taking it all from the soil, and the physical soil that the tree is growing in is being absorbed into the tree? In which case, the scale, the plus of the scale would only be the physical mass of the soil and what comes from the air. Does this make sense?
Yes.
So if you have this contained system, then all of a sudden you can start asking questions like, well, how much soil is left at the end of this? So then let that tree grow for 5 years, pull that tree out, and then weigh all the tree biomass and weigh the soil and compare the soil amount that you started with to the soil amount you ended with. It will be strikingly similar because the tree only takes certain nutrients in like a tiny amount in terms of weight of all the rest of the soil.
Yeah.
The rest of it is the soil is a place where it gets water, and there's different nutrients that go through the fungus and that kind of thing into the tree. But the general mass of how that tree functions and like what becomes the bulk of a tree comes from the air.
How about that?
So that's why we played a Jeopardy game a while back, and the question at the end was like, what's the best carbon capture mechanism that exists in this world? The answer is trees.
Yeah.
They do that. That is what they do.
Trees aren't only not real, but if they were real, trees aren't real, but if they were real, they would be made of air.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, God. Oh, so the answer is yes, that is a part of photosynthesis. Now, it would be considered its own thing in that photosynthesis has like multiple different like sections of it. And that is the part that's like, well, photosynthesis is not one like reaction where it's like,
right,
like, take this, add conduct photosynthesis, get this. There's like two different sections where photosynthesis is a larger process, not an exact chemical equation like what I show.
Right.
There's multiple different things that happen. It's not as simple quite as that. But
photosynthesis is the Lord of the Rings, but it has within it 3, quote, books.
Yeah.
But it's still all one big tome.
Excellent, Alex.
You know what? I'm here for that sort of thing.
Yeah, you are. So is everyone else.
Thank you so much for your question, Corey. If you have a question about trees for Casey, email us at arbortrarypod@gmail.com. It's ARBORTRARY pod. Join us on the old Instagram at arbortrarypod, or support this podcast at patreon.com/arbortrarypod. Join the Arboretum for 2 bonus episodes a month about other related topics and trees, or the Cone of the Month Club to get a unique die-cut cone sticker illustrated by an independent artist every single month in your mailbox. It's all very cool. Also, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to review and rate it and give it a cone score on your podcast platform of choice. Casey.
Alex Crowson. I'm so happy that we got through this. I have to say, I've been wanting to bring up these subjects that we did for a long time now, like almost a year ago.
Wow, since the beginning.
I remember in May, I wanted to talk about this last year, and I workshopped it with Hannah, with you. Like, I tried to see if I could explain it. I fell flat every time. I couldn't do it.
This is growth, my man.
This is growth. I feel good, but I have to say, like, I read a whole book about it. I read some articles, and I was like, okay, I think I can do this
Today's
now.
the day.
Today's the day. So we did it, and I hope that everyone else thought it was at least somewhat interesting. Taxonomy in itself is not something you're like, I'm very interested. Usually, I don't know. I'm just saying.
I kind of disagree, Casey.
The fact that you do makes me feel so good.
Yeah, well, you presented it, these last 2 episodes on taxonomy, you presented it in a great way.
Thank you.
You're a very engaging storyteller, but I will also say I am naturally interested in words and language, which taxonomy essentially is.
Yeah.
It's a language of categorizing nature, I guess.
Kind of is. Yeah.
So yeah, they were fascinating tales, and thus concludes our two-parter on taxonomy.
That is it. We'll come back sometime.
And with that, we say, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Completely Arbortrary. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Ciao. Completely Arbortrary is produced by Alex Crowson and Casey Clapp.
Our artwork is by Jillian Barthold, and our music is by Aves and the Mini Vandals.
And you can support the podcast at patreon.com/arbitrarypod.
And find additional readings at completelyarbitrary.com. Thanks for listening.